Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Unprocessed Sugar. I'm Dr. David Sugar, your host, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have you here and what we're looking forward to doing. My name, Sugar, the heart of the name of the podcast, right? Unprocessed Sugar. It's a nod to keeping things pure, raw, real, unprocessed, cutting out the noise that processes everything we hear and see and eat. I work as an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a medical doctor, and I've been in practice for 30 years, almost 30 years in Florida. But I'm also a husband and a father and a friend. And for purposes of this podcast, I think most importantly, I'm a patient. And I have the same concerns and fears and worries that you do. Now, 5 years ago, I was in terrible health, the worst shape I've been in my whole life. Over the course of a couple of years, I had 5 major operations, one of which was open heart surgery. I was born with a birth defect in my aortic valve, and I had to have open heart surgery and have a valve replacement. 4 days in the ICU is a big eye-opener. And I thought to myself, something has to change. I cannot continue to live like this. Overworked, poor diet, not sleeping, no exercise. I didn't even know where to start, but I knew things had to change. You know, as a doctor and as a surgeon, I've dedicated my career, my life, really, to helping people, making people better, helping them get better. But over the years, I've come to realize that there are some big shortcomings in our healthcare system, or the healthcare delivery system, and all the ancillary systems that are associated with our health. So I began to question things, and not in a flippant, disrespectful manner, but in an inquisitive curiosity manner. But I also started to question things to have accountability, to have the information that was coming to me be vetted, to be accountable. Don't just take things at face value. We as doctors, quite often, I think, do that. Oh, it came out of this journal and that must be how it is. But I started diving deeper into all the different elements that affect our health and our well-being, our diet, our food source, big pharma, the insurance industry. I've learned that these aspects of the system aren't always out for our best interest. I get it. Business is business. But if you're in the business of health and well-being for patients, your number one priority better be the well-being of that patient and not your profits. How many times have you heard profits before patients? Well, we're going to question the status quo. We're going to look deep into these different issues. I want you to come on my journey. That's what I've considered this to be. I've been on a journey for the past 4 years to learn this, institute it in my life, my family's life, and I realized people want to hear this. In my practice over the last several years, I found myself talking more and more to patients about these very issues we're going to dive into. And I realized how poorly informed most of us are, including doctors, how starved patients are to have the truth, and how much they want to be empowered with knowledge so they can make decisions for themselves. So I want you to join me on this journey I've embarked upon to question the status quo, to find the truth, find what our options are, find what we can do to make our lives better. In medical school, I had no education on nutrition or diet whatsoever. And in the medical school out west, a group of faculty were lobbying for several years to get nutrition on the curriculum. And they finally succeeded for 4 hours. In a doctor's entire education, they get 4 hours on nutrition and diet. That's crazy, don't you think? So I began educating myself on these things. I want you to come on this journey with me, please. Hear what I'm hearing, see what I'm seeing, feel what I'm feeling, and together, let's empower ourselves to make good choices, be critical thinkers. On this journey, one of the first things I came across was something called the Flexner report, Flexner, the Flexner report. What's the Flexner report? Around 1910, Abraham Flexner, who was a Washington bureaucrat, was charged with touring the country and basically inspecting and evaluating all the different medical schools. Back then, there were mainstream medical schools, but there were a lot of ancillary type medical fields that had a school. The school of electrotherapy, so forth. Some of them were reasonable, some of them were complete quackery. So they wanted to, and some med schools were good, some med schools were below average. So there was an altruistic goal here in that they wanted to consolidate medical education, get rid of the bad med schools, get rid of the quackery. But there was an evil, sinister plot at hand, and this is not a conspiracy theory. Although Carnegie's name is in the title of the report, it was actually Rockefeller's money that was behind it. You see, John Rockefeller had bought a pharmaceutical plant in Germany, and he realized and learned the vast number of medications one can make that are petroleum-based. John Rockefeller, the oil man, right? Petroleum. So what this Flexner report did is they basically bribed the medical schools, if you will. But they went to the med schools and they said, I'm paraphrasing, here's the curriculum you're going to now teach. You will no longer teach traditional homeopathic or holistic remedies. In fact, those faculty were kicked off staff, or were blackballed and blacklisted, and no longer could contribute to the education of a doctor or healthcare provider. And what you're going to teach is science-backed, petroleum-based drugs are the way to go, the way to treat patients. So that was a massive paradigm shift in the medical system in this country. Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but 30 years later, we started seeing big rises in the rates of cancer. So as I was saying, big paradigm shift in medical education, but more importantly than that is what it did and how it translated to how doctors practice medicine and how we prescribe medicines. I know there are forces at play that aren't always out for what's best for us, but when I read about this, I was so mad. And I don't know if I was more mad about the fact that I had never heard of it until 3-4 years ago. I think it's absolutely crazy. I think all doctors, all medical students should be told this from the get-go, because at the very least, it tells you, question things, be a critical thinker. Don't just take what's told you as face value and that's the truth. There are a lot of aspects of our healthcare in this country that are absolutely wonderful. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go anywhere else for my open heart surgery, but right here, my knee replacement, my shoulder replacement, whatever they may be, would you really want to go to another country for that? So why are some of our statistics so poor in this country? I say it's not because of the doctor's ability, nurse's ability, hospital's ability to take care of people. It's because we as a society in America have become significantly chronically ill. There's an obesity epidemic in this country. There is a chronic illness epidemic in this country. That's why our statistics are so poor. Not because the healthcare can't tackle and take on the job. So with that being said, that's the side of the equation we can work on. That's the side of the equation we have influence over. We can make decisions about our food, about our health, our well-being, do we exercise or not? What do we drink? What other environmental toxins we might be exposed to? We have control over a lot of that. So that's what I want to focus on, is what can we do to make things better? You know, there's just a lot of flaws in what we've been taught and told. So I want to crack those open and talk to you about them. And again, I want you to join me on my journey. We're going to cover a large number of topics. And let me first say that if anyone has something that they'd like me to talk about or to discuss, research, dive into, please let me know. Leave a comment, send a message via email, social media comments, and we will do our best to try to address all those for us. Look, I don't know everything there is to know about this stuff. I don't think I want to know everything there is to know about this stuff. But I do know where to start looking, and I do know the questions to ask. And when I get those answers, we will get those answers. Please, I want you to know, I'm not here to just rip apart things and criticize them and tell you how bad everything is. We got to have a solution, right? We got to have an answer to this. how we get better. I will always leave you with an action item every episode, hopefully more than one. But, right, we got to have the ability to change these things. Well, how do you do that? And I'm going to tell you what I do. Certainly not going to tell you this is what you need to do. Everybody's different, right? And, of course, the disclaimer has to be read. The lawyers say you got to put that up there. But I'm letting you know this is what I'm doing for me. This is what I'm not doing for me and my family and my friends who probably want me to shut up about this by now. But I want to give you answers and solutions and action items. Things that I'm doing, things that my family's doing. And then if they work for you, great. But it's not about just criticizing everything, right? We've got to have some answers. You got to have a solution. Okay, great, doc. So this is terrible. What do I do about it? That's ultimately what we're going to accomplish here. But we need to look at things like our food source. Our food source, in my opinion, is probably the leading cause of the chronic health epidemic in this country. Things like glyphosate, which is in Roundup, if it's green, it kills it, is a widely used herbicide. And the United States uses about 20% of the worldwide use of glyphosate. It's a known neurotoxin, the nervous system. It can affect the nervous system. It can affect our endocrine system. Our sex hormones can be affected by it. Our gut biome, that's the name it's given for the bacteria that live in our gut and the microenvironment there. All that's affected by it. And it's not necessary to use. There are other alternatives. Maybe they're a little more expensive, maybe a little less convenient, but they're not going to harm us. There are thousands of chemicals that are allowed to be in our food in this country that in other countries are outright illegal. Not looked down upon or frowned upon, but illegal. You may have heard a couple months ago, red dye number 5, got outlawed. So it can't be on our food anymore. Well, you know, approximately 30 years ago, they made it so you could not put it in cosmetics. So for 30 years, they said, nope, don't put it on your skin. But you can eat it, put it in your body. What kind of craziness is that? So all those artificial dyes, they've been known to cause problems. Some of them even cause cancer. I'm not trying to scare you or alarm you, but it's important for us to know this. My goodness, look at the label on a food product. It's 10, 20 items long. Half of them you can't pronounce. I can't even pronounce some of them, and I'm a scientist at heart. If you can't pronounce it and you don't know what it is, you probably shouldn't eat it or put it in your body. But the other aspect of our food source that is causing harm is the ultra-processed foods. About 50 years ago, when fat became the villain, and fats were taken out of foods, and they still need to make them taste good. And that's when you saw this big rise in high fructose corn syrup and the sugar content go up in foods, and the ultra processing of foods began to take place. And when you hear ultra processed or processed, that usually means that they've taken the raw food and they've heavily manipulated it. And there's different levels of processing, but the most significant one is it doesn't even resemble anything like what it started out as. But in order to do that, they quite often add things to it for taste and texture, because we want it to taste good, we want it to feel good. But in doing so, those are chemicals. Those are chemicals that can be harmful to us. And to make it taste good, it's almost always loaded with sugar and sweeteners, which we've come to learn is really the ultimate culprit in all this. My name's Sugar, but I got to tell you, sugar is the villain. Sugar causes significant inflammation, and inflammation ultimately is our main nemesis, as we'll get into as we go through a lot of these topics. Number one priority, try to eliminate the inflammation, and things fall into place after that. I want to get into things regarding Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical industry. They're the ones that I've heard the phrase profits before patients the most. You know, United States of America is only the second country in the world, alongside New Zealand, that allows direct-to-consumer marketing. In other words, commercials and magazine ads for the drugs. Why is that? You may have heard of the Sackler family recently with the OxyContin scandal. They're the ones who pioneered the advertising industry and the pharmaceutical industry together. The three brothers, Valium and Librium were their big drugs back then. And the term mother's little helper, that came from them. That came from that drug. So why do we need to advertise our drugs to a layperson? Watch TV. Every commercial break, there's ads for pharmaceuticals and or a vaccine. Pretty much almost every commercial break, and sometimes there's multiple commercials within one commercial break. We'll get into that more when that episode comes up, but I think most of us have heard to some extent that Big Pharma has ulterior motives sometimes. Now, let me say though, the pharmaceutical industry has saved millions of lives and has made millions of lives better. But when you hear things like the average United States adult takes 4 prescription drugs, or should I say, an American adult on average takes 4 prescription medications. If you're over 65, that number gets into double digits. Approximately 50% of the pharmaceuticals industry's revenue is generated from sales within the United States. However, 70% of the profits they make are from the United States sales because the price of our drugs in this country is so high. As recent as 2023, the United States pharmaceutical sales were over $700 billion. On average, a little over $1,100 a year is spent on pharmaceuticals per person in the United States. That is 2.5 to 3 times the amount in other countries. Doesn't that make you question why? None of that sounds right to me, but it's all true. So why is that? We're going to dive into that and get that question answered. A huge topic or area of study that's becoming very legitimized and popular is anti-aging, longevity medicine. I follow Dr. Peter Attia, if I'm saying it right, A-T-T-I-A. He hates using that term, but it's the term that summarizes that field of study the best. It's not, when you hear longevity medicine, it's not, hey, I want to live forever. I want to live better. You know, there's a lifespan and there's but I want to live well within that time frame. Sure, I'd like to live a little longer, but I definitely want to live better. In the field of anti-aging longevity medicine, that can be very confusing and overwhelming. As I dive into this and I learn more, there are supplements that I've never heard of that people take and utilize and swear by. But with any new emerging field, there's a lot of noise at times. So what's BS? What's legitimate? What's something that would help? What's something that you may want to stay away from? So we're going to spend some time looking at that and also the modalities that are out there now for well-being and longevity, such as hyperbaric oxygen treatments and infrared lights, saunas with infrared lights, things such as this. One of my flaws is I like gadgets, so I'm buying all these little gadgets, health trackers and things that help you sleep better. I'd be embarrassed to say how many of those I've probably bought. Some of them work, some of them are junk. So learn from my experience. What's worthwhile and what should you just move on from? We're going to spend some time talking about cholesterol. More and more is coming out lately that's making us question what really is cholesterol's role in heart disease and vascular disease, because we're really starting to learn that some of what we were thinking and had been taught isn't exactly the way it is. Again, going back 50 years ago, there was this big push about fats, right? Fats were the cause of most everything bad. I mean, my gosh, they were making fake eggs, although I don't think egg beaters are completely fake, but they're processed eggs, egg beaters in the 70s. I'm dating myself, but eat a real egg. A number was set at which your cholesterol should be under, right? That number was arbitrary. I don't believe, from what I've read, that there was any good hard science would help them determine that number. And then they changed it. They actually lowered it. We're going to find out why, or at least question why. I don't want to say right now, but I want to do more research. I think I know why. There really was a movement, you could call it a conspiracy, to vilify animal fat and make sugar the hero. The sugar industry was behind it. And this dates back to the 50s even. This is well documented. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not my ideas on things. The sugar industry pushed to cover the ills of sugar, and somebody's got to be the villain. It's going to be animal fat. But going back to the ultra-processed foods, you take the animal fat out of food, they don't have the same taste. French fries at McDonald's, I've heard, have up to 17 different ingredients in them. Some to make them look better, smell better, taste better, crispier, salt, of course. And they fry them in junky oil. That's going to be one of our topics too. But they used to make them with three things: potatoes, tallow, and salt. Tallow is beef fat, rendered down, and then you're cooking it. Well, that gave them the flavor. The tallow gave them the flavor with the salt also. And you remove the tallow, now it has no flavor. So you have to put all this other stuff in it to give it flavor and taste. We're now learning that cholesterol is not the big bad evil villain. Without cholesterol, you can't function. Your brain can't function. Your brain needs cholesterol. The brain has nerves that go out into the body. Those nerves are wrapped with a sheath called a myelin sheath. The myelin sheath needs cholesterol. A lot of our hormones, which we need to function, right? Especially the sex hormones, have a sterol-based cholesterol. So without cholesterol, you would die. You can't function. Now, of course, there's limits and there's ratios and things like that, and I have a hard time keeping them straight. So I want to share with you what I've learned and what I'm doing about it. But again, critical thinking, question, what's going on here? I heard someone say once that cholesterol is not killing your arteries, it's building your brain, where the brain accumulates a good percentage, should sound more scientific, of the cholesterol in our body. We're going to talk about fats and oils. I was terribly, terribly confused. What's good, what's bad, mono, poly, trans fats? I don't know. So I do now, though. So we're going to dive into that. What are the good fats? What are the bad fats? What are the fats you should never eat? But again, action items. Okay, great, Doc. You told me all that. Well, how do I do that? Okay, we're going to talk about that. I think a lot of what we're going to be hitting on is that we have traded our health for convenience. And it is a lot more convenient to just pick up a bag of chips and eat them versus maybe make your own. Potato, tallow, and some salt. Okay? Now, you can buy those items that way, but they are more expensive, and it can get pretty pricey. I don't want to promote any particular brand, but there's one brand that I've had that is awesome. But man, they're prohibitively expensive. And who's got the time to make them your own? But again, we cannot keep trading our health for convenience. I think one thing I can leave you with is that universally, but I've been hearing and reading and learning, is seed oils are bad. Stay away from seed oils. Canola oil is in almost everything. Sunflower oil. Just try to avoid those if at all possible. Olive oil is great. I've got to get something clarified for us before that episode. Avocado. Avocado oil is supposed to be a really good oil for you, but it's got a seed, so I'm not so sure where that one falls. I'll get back to you. I'll know by then. But see, this is an example of what I was getting at earlier. I don't know all this, but we're going to learn it together. I'm going to teach you what I find and tell you what I find, and hopefully we'll all be the better for it. A topic we'll discuss that was one of the first things me and my family really instituted in our lives. I call it the toxins in the house. Do you know that two items in our house that are toxic, the most common items that we have in our house that are toxic, are cleaning products. Makes a little sense, right? They're chemicals. Our cookware, Teflon coating. A lot of you may be aware of just how bad that can be, but you have a skillet, a frying pan with Teflon on it, and you heat it up to 400 or 500 degrees and you're cooking in it, that chemical can leach into your food and cause a significant amount of problems for you. So our cleaning products, like I said, they're chemicals, but there are so many alternatives out there. My family and I use a particular brand. It's mostly plant-based. I see these commercials now. What's that one? The Poof. It's to get rid of like dog poop smells. And then the other one with the blonde lady who's so energetic and enthusiastic. It's something clean. Get clean or be clean. But those are almost all plant-based plant-based products. I hate to call them chemicals because it makes it sound bad, but they're almost all plant-based, and that's what we use in our house. Our soap, our deodorant. Please don't use deodorant with aluminum in it. Now again, it takes a little work to find those. They can be a little more expensive, but don't trade your health for convenience, please. Or you could just stink and not use any deodorant, right? So toxins in the house, that was probably the first category, so to speak, that me and my family began to make changes because it's so easy. Get a new frying pan. Although my wife doesn't like that heavy cast iron. I love it. I'm a Southern boy. Yeah, we use cast iron. But seriously, look around you. Air fresheners. Oh my goodness, read what's in those things. And when we get to that episode, I'm going to give you a great recipe, I guess, for an air freshener. You can make yourself right at home. It's pretty easy and it works great. I can't wait to get to the episode about fitness and exercise. I'm going to have my good friend Chase Petty, who is in that picture there on our mountain climbing trip. That's Mount Baker out in Washington State. We were with a company called Mountain Madness, and that was the first mountain we did. More about that later. But Chase is a personal fitness trainer who has begun a business that he calls the Adventure Trainer. When we were training for this mountain climb, he had the great idea of kind of gearing his work and client towards people who are going on some kind of adventure. They're going to walk the a Camino in Europe, and they got to get in better shape, but that's a specific goal, and he works with them on that. So I can't wait to have him on. Great guy, very enthusiastic. And again, I'm going to leave you with some action items. I didn't even know. I couldn't. I'd get out of breath tying my shoes. Did not know where to start, but just start. Go for a walk. You try to move every day. Try to stretch and try to move every day. If you can do a little resistance training as well, that will help quite a bit. We're learning as we age, probably the best thing we can do fitness-wise is resistance training. That doesn't mean lifting heavy weights. It can be rubber bands, the TheraBands, the therapy bands, but light weights, but just something with resistance. And keep your bone density strong, keep your balance healthy and well. One of the biggest things that happen to people that lead to their demise towards the latter part of life are falls. And the statistics on falls are very scary. 1 out of 3 people who break a hip pass away within a year. That's very scary. Now, I will say I've often wondered if they broke their hip because they were so medically frail and then they were towards the end anyway, or did the hip fracture start a whole nother ball rolling and that led to their passing. But either way, we got to do something. Stretch and walk. Simple walk is very valuable for you. So we'll dive into that on that episode. We're going to dive into the insurance industry and its power and control over our healthcare system. Talk about profits over patients. I know most of you have probably had some issue and frustration with the healthcare system and its relationship with the insurance industry. I don't blame you. I feel the same way. I'm a patient and I'm a doctor. I'm getting it on both sides. But there are things such as United Healthcare had an AI program that basically denied most claims, if not all. And then, of course, people would appeal. But some people wouldn't. Some would fall through the cracks. Some might pass. Some just give up. They ended up with a net of 33% denial. That means 1 out of every 3 claims got denied. Well, the industry average is 16 to 18%. So that means they are double the industry average for denials. Nothing's happened. They really haven't been fined or penalized. There's been a few lawsuits and judgments against them. But for the most part, there are some class action lawsuits that are in the process, but nothing's really happened to them. We all probably heard on the news about the CEO who got shot in the back, and of course he didn't deserve that. No one would, and the person who did that's terrible, an evil person. But the response that's coming out afterwards really shows how frustrated and angry everyone is with the insurance industry. I mean, some people are holding this kid up as a folk hero for doing what he did, which is in itself is horrible to think. But why are 90,000 doctors, 10% of the doctors in the United States of America are employed by United Healthcare? Isn't that a conflict of interest? That doesn't make any sense to me. So we want to look at things like that and question it, come up with some plans to hopefully change it. That's going to be a hard one to pull off, though. I think the only way it could ever really change is the insurance industry has to go away. I'm not thinking that's going to happen. So okay, that doesn't happen. Then what can we do? How can we work things to be better for us? What action steps should we take? We're going to talk about vaccines. I, by no means, am an anti-vaxxer. And gosh knows that the vaccines have saved millions and millions of lives. But there's no doubt they've caused a lot of harm. Even the biggest proponent of vaccines would admit that, I'm sure. Good outweigh the bad? I don't know. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I want to know something like this. Why does a newborn baby, a baby just born today, why are they getting a hepatitis B vaccine? And they get 3 of them by the time they're 9 months of age, I believe it is. But for sure, they get one the day they're born. About a little more than 0.5%, 1 out of every 180 pregnant women have hepatitis B. But we're going to give every single baby, the other 169, a vaccine. The only way you get hepatitis B is through bodily fluids. Sexual contact, blood transfusion, things like that. I'm pretty sure that baby's not going to get exposed to anything more than its mother or its own family. So I just can't make sense of that. So I'm not just across the board saying they shouldn't get it. But I want to know why they are getting it. What's the rationale behind why they should get that vaccine? I'm having a hard time coming to grips with the fact that they're getting this, and I'm not so sure they need it. So we're going to look into that. There's definitely a lot of news out there and information about links of autism and vaccines. I want to know more about that, and I'll let you know what I find out, or what I have already found out. One episode, in fact, most of these will probably be several episodes. I want to talk about cancer treatment. Now, I'm not saying there's some cancer conspiracy. Some people think that there's got to be a cure. They're holding it from us. I don't think that. There's no way. I think the best treatment for cancer, don't get it. Now, I'm not trying to be flippant by saying that, but seriously, don't put stuff in your body that causes cancer. Don't be exposed to environmental agents and toxins that cause cancer. That's the number one thing you can do to help prevent it. And there are some other things you can actively do, some certain supplements and so forth that help our body defend itself against things like cancer. We'll talk about that. I'm also seeing and hearing and reading a lot about these emerging treatment methods. I do not like the word alternative. I'll talk about that in a second. But things such as hyperbaric oxygen, ketogenic diets, most cancers, not all, most cancers can only feed on sugar. Well, let's starve the cancer. Eat a ketogenic diet, which means no sugar. Your body goes into ketosis. The brain can function perfectly fine on ketones. It doesn't have to have sugar. There are certain medications that in Arkansas have been made over the counter just recently. I don't want to say the name. I'm out of fear that some of these platforms will censor me if I happen to say the name of this one drug that was talked about a lot 5 years ago when COVID hit. And in Arkansas, the governor there has made it over the counter. It's so safe. The 2 doctors who invented it won the Nobel Prize for it. Billions of doses have been used. Very safe. Pennies a dose. Saved millions of lives in Asia and Africa where people die from parasitic infections by the millions. And it's starting to show promise in treatments of some forms of cancer. But boy, I don't want to profess that I'm a cancer expert. I'm a bone doctor. But I want to learn about this. I want to have guests on. They're going to tell us, what's going on here. Let's cut through the noise, find out what's really at play here. I want to thank you very much for joining me. This is something that has been brewing for a number of years now. It's very dear to my heart. It means a lot to me. Like I said, I don't want to live forever, but I want to live better. I want to live as well and fit as I can. And I don't want to keep it a secret. I want to share it with you. I'm listening to my patients the last several years, like I was saying, and it's overwhelming how hungry everyone is to hear this information and to cut through cut through the crap. What is real, what's not, what's processed, and what's unprocessed. So thanks again for joining me. I'm really excited. It's going to be a wild ride. Thanks again. See you next time. Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our first episode of Unprocessed Sugar. I hope you got something out of it. I'd like to invite you to join us for our next episode, which will be titled Toxins in the House and Poison on Your Plate, where we're going to talk about exactly that. Things that are in our home that are toxic to us. For example, nonstick skillets and cleaning products. And then the poisons on our plate. The chemicals that are in our food that are against the law in Europe. Food dyes, for example, or the things that are used in the farm, the pesticides, the fertilizers, and then the things that are used to process our food. But I'm not just going to tell you what's wrong with everything. More importantly, I'm going to give you action items, things you can do, things you can make changes with, easy things that'll make a big difference. Small things, big difference. Please join me for our next episode of Unprocessed Sugar, Toxins in the House and Poison on Your Plate. Hi, I'm Dr. David Sugar, a doctor here in Florida, and thank you for joining us on our podcast. A quick note, this is for educational and general information purposes only. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship, and please consult with your own healthcare provider before making any changes to your own care. If you are having a medical emergency, please call 911 or your local emergency number. Any items, tests, medications that we talk about or discuss are for information purposes only and are not an endorsement. Once again, thank you for joining us, and please see the website for the full disclosure and waiver. Thank you very much.